20th. We're here for the Pitkin County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I think we need to call the meeting to order, and I think the first order of business is to establish whether we have a quorum. Is that correct?
Correct. We have Joe Kraybacher online, Suzanne Cassidy, Debbie Kelly, and Joseph Mason in-house.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Do I ask for public comments beforehand, or do we dive right in?
So we go into any commissioner comments for this evening? Are we good?
You mean things that aren't on the agenda?
Yes. Okay. Any planning staff updates for the commissioners that's not on the agenda?
Just to, as you know, we have a busy meeting schedule for planning and zoning, with a lot of caseload, applications for you to review, and then in March, the comprehensive plan. Suzanne, I don't know if you want to go into any detail about that, but all of those meetings are really important to have attendance and quorum and participation. So thank you.
I think the only thing I'd add there is the conversation about whether moving forward you all would want to start, or it would work to start at 4:30. And we never seem to get all of you in one place at the same time. But again, I guess for the four of you, is that a possibility, or would you prefer to stick with 5 o'clock start times?
I could do either.
Okay.
I would prefer 5, but I could do 4:30.
Okay.
I can do either, and would be happy to help y'all get home a little bit earlier. Yeah.
Joe, any Kraybacher, any comment from you?
Joe, you might be on mute.
Muted. No, I'm unmuted. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm fine with whatever the majority would like to do, 4:30 or 5.
Okay. Well, we'll follow up on that. We'll go back to the responses we got from the other folks and see where we land on that. So we'll let you know. Thank you.
With the responses that you got, I didn't see anybody who said no to 4:30.
There's 2 people I haven't heard from, so
Who are those?
the 2 people who aren't here, Zach and Chelsea.
Who aren't here
Yeah.
tonight?
Yeah.
So Doug and Zach.
Well, Doug said yes to 4:30, and Zach and Chelsea said have not commented.
Oh, Jack and who?
Zach and Chelsea.
Oh, and Chelsea.
Yeah, sorry. And then we have no one online for public comment and no one in house for public comment.
Anyone like to comment as a member of the public?
Let me try that.
Hearing none then, should we move to the land use action before us, the text amendment for Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code?
Yes, let's do it.
At this point, Joe can sign off if he needs to.
Okay, thanks. Joe, I'm not sure if you heard that, but if you'd like to drop off, you are welcome to, and or you're welcome to stay.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang in here for a little bit.
Okay, good.
So
I'm
I
happy to
feel-
hear that. I'm
Okay.
happy to hear that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, today we are talking about the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code Land Use Text Amendments. We will go through what the request is, what the process is. You'll see this acronym a lot, CWRC, that's Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code, because it's such a mouthful. We'll review the land use code text amendments. We'll kind of go line by line through those, and then our engagement and stakeholder summary, and then our analysis and recommendation. So starting off with what we're going to review tonight, first is when we integrate the Wildfire Resiliency Code into our family of regulations, we're required to modify chapter 6, 7, 9, and 11 in text amendments only. So we'll go into much more detail about this, but that's the scope. The code adoption process for a text amendment, per the code, is to meet with you all to review the text amendments and hopefully attain a recommendation to the BOCC and a PNC resolution. That would be your time to say, we looked at these text amendments and board, we recommend that you adopt the ordinance that staff brings forth. Earlier today, we did meet with the BOCC in a work session to go over this project. That's not part of the adoption process, but that is something that we did today. So this is my second meeting about this topic today. So after the PNC resolution indicating a recommendation to the board, we'll do first reading for the ordinance with the BOCC on February 25th, second reading on March 25th, and then the code would be in effect 30 days after the public notice of the approval, which would be late April, early May. And just so you know, and we'll get into this, the BOCC first and second readings will look at these land use code text amendments, but also building code amendments, and we'll get more into that as we go through. What is the CWRC? So this is sort of standardized state legislation to help enhance community safety and resiliency from wildfires through the adoption of codes and standards. This is a statewide effort, and the state didn't really modify whether a county was, or a town was already regulating wildfire, which we have been doing for more than 20 years. However, we are required to adopt this code. The content of the CWRC includes the model code, which is the text, and the model code is required to go into the building code, not the land use code. Currently, our wildfire regs are housed in the land use code. The CWRC also published statewide wildfire intensity mapping, which we'll look at. It is different from the mapping that we currently have. Our current mapping did come from the state, but that was years ago. I think we at least started using it in 2006, sorry. So it's been around for a while and things have changed. The regulations, the CWRC model code, is based on the Colorado State Forest Service Home Ignition Zone Guide that provides guidance for structure hardening and defensible space. And the bodies that were required to adopt the code, in part, there's others, but there's county governments, municipal governments, and fire districts. So you'll see in our engagement, we've been in coordinating with all of our neighbors and fire districts. We'll go to mapping next. This is not showing the entire county. This is showing City of Aspen. The airport is sort of centrally located. Our current mapping has 3 hazard zones. The green is a low hazard, the peach color is a medium hazard, and the severe is indicated in red. And each one of those currently has sort of escalating regulations in the land use code. When we switch over to the state map, you'll see what shows up is a lot of red and orange. So the red is high intensity for wildfire hazard, and the orange is moderate intensity. It's not showing, there is a low intensity level, it just is not shown anywhere in Pickens County.
It's in Washington State, isn't it?
Probably the front range.
My apologies. Can I interrupt for a second? Is
Absolutely.
it possible to put that on the screen or have the, because I don't see it.
Oh,
all I see is people's faces. And then, I don't know if that's possible or
On
not.
the Zoom.
Anyway,
Are you on your phone or laptop? Or
I'm on my phone. Yeah, so maybe it's not possible. If it's not, that's fine.
I think you have to swipe
Yeah.
because the phone can't look at you can't look at the attendees and the screen at the same time.
Right.
Oh, I see. All right, let me
I-
play around with it and you guys continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. The other thing to note on here is you'll notice that the city of Aspen and Airport Business Center are sort of holes in the color. Those are unmapped areas. Those areas where we've carved out a way to regulate those in the draft building code that we'll take to the board. So you won't review that, but just so you know, the current practice is the entire county is regulated for wildfire hazard, and the entire county will be regulated for wildfire hazard in the existing condition and the proposed. And then with the model code, there's some dates that are required, that all of the county's municipalities, fire districts are required to comply with. So on July 1st, that's when, and I think that sentence is wrong. The CWRC was adopted by the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, not the state legislature. But that's when it sort of became available to everyone, in indicating some deadlines of April 1st. All communities would need to adopt the CWRC in their building code. And then July 1st is when the code will be in effect. And our current plan is to meet that schedule where we would be adopted on March 25th at that second BOCC reading, and we would be in compliance in late April, early May, in terms of when the code would be in effect. Okay, so now we're going to dive into a little more detail. What this table goes on 2 slides. What this table is showing is that a lot of the topics that are important to the state, Pickens County currently regulates. So the first column is showing what that regulation topic is. The next column in the existing land use code indicates if we're currently regulating that. And you'll see on this sheet, it says yes all the way down. So we are currently regulating all those topics. And then the next 2 columns are the proposed condition, showing some elements will remain in the land use code and some elements will move to the building code. So we can go down the line here. So in terms of the hazards map that we just looked at, that is part of the existing land use code and the existing practice. We will continue to reference that map in the land use code. However, the building code will have all the detail of the map, what the hazard levels mean, and really have more detail. So the land use code is essentially going to point to the building code instead of being repetitive. In the next topic is the wildfire hazard delineation in the activity envelope. That's part of our existing practice, and it will continue to be part of the planning process in Pickens County. We've adapted this section to accommodate the additions to the building code with the CWRC, but the intent is that a wildfire hazard analysis is a critical component of the activity envelope and site plan review process in terms of hazard avoidance and hazard mitigation. For defensible space, that content is currently in the land use code, and moving into the CWRC, the land use code will now reference the site and area requirements that are in the building code by citing that section of their code instead of duplicating the code in two places. And so the defensible space content will move to the building code. And we've also, you're not going to review the building code today, but we did add detail on the defensible space to accommodate situations with steep slopes and defensible space around driveways. And that's above and beyond what the CWRC requires. And that is supported by the fire districts we were in coordination with. And then access is a component of the existing land use code and will continue to be part of the land use code. However, we did move the access requirements to section 730 for roads, driveways, and parking. But the content's the same. Water supply for fire safety. This is a topic that was not covered in the model code, but is very important for development in Pickens County. So that content will remain in the land use code. Building materials and structure hardening. This seems like a no-brainer to move that to the building code. So you won't see that in the text amendments today, but they are aligned with the state requirements in the building code when we bring that to the board next month. In terms of maintenance and miscellaneous requirements, that's also something that will remain in the land use code, so that the building code can really be focused on compliance topics that can be verified at the time of building permit. This next sheet, we're going to continue. So currently we have a process where we would accept recommendations from local wildfire experts to give a site-specific analysis of what the wildfire hazard is on the property in case it might be different from what our map was showing. And in the CWRC, they call this same practice essentially ground truthing. And so that's currently written in the land use code. We're required to put it in the building code. And so what we did in the proposed land use code is point to the ground truthing process in the building code. However, it is when it's practical for development projects to do that exercise in the planning process, it's you'll see that in the text amendment that we are guiding applicants to do that during the planning process and not during the building permit process. For site signage, this is something that's not in the land use code, but it is in Title IX. I had our addressing staff look at what the model code said, and she essentially said we're already in compliance with those recommendations in the CWRC. Retaining walls are, as it relates to wildfire regs, we have a lot of retaining wall regs, but as it relates to wildfire, we don't have anything in the land use code. You won't see anything about that in the proposed land use code, but we have detail in the proposed building code about that. Fencing is, we do have regs in the land use code about fencing, but there's not a lot of detail. We took the fencing out just to leave it in the building code with the CWRC, and there's more clear dimensional detail that's provided. So I think that's an improvement. In terms of plant materials and species, that's not detailed in the land use code currently, but the building code will provide essentially a list of acceptable plants from the Colorado State Forest Service based on their ignition resistant planting guide. Fuel storage is existing in the land use code and will continue. Nothing in the building code about that. And then this forest management typologies, I This is something that's sort of touched on in our existing land use code, in that like aspen trees aren't subject to the defensible space requirements because of the like the aspen stand type of like the way that that forest develops over time. And we did add a section in the building code aligned with that home ignition zone guide that clarifies the different forest management typologies and achieving defensible space in those different forest types, because it's not a one size fits all. So I do wanna just clarify I had a list here, no. So the home ignition zone guide and the CWRC are based on like a mixed Douglas fir forest that's below 9,500 feet in elevation. And so what this forest management typologies, it also recognizes, well, how do we manage a pinyon juniper forest, a lodgepole pine, a spruce and a fir, and an aspen, with more clear guidance about achieving effective defensible space in those contexts. Now we're gonna go line by line with the land use code. And we're gonna do those 4 chapters just like I mentioned at the top. We're in chapter 6 right now. You see these a lot for GMQS applications when you're scoring, staff is scoring them, you're reviewing staff scoring to potentially award additional floor area to different applicants. This section mentioned wildfire, and something to like remember in this is that essentially our existing condition is there's those 3 hazard areas. There's low, there's medium, and moderate. And we wanted the reg is trying to keep development mostly in the low hazard areas and mitigate where that's impossible. But this state regulation is essentially saying no one is in a low hazard area, like everyone is at risk. So you're gonna do your development project, so just mitigate properly. So it didn't seem fair to require, so just keeping that in mind when we're doing scoring, I suppose. So the score of 0 means the proposed development does not comply with the county's standards for floodplain, steep slopes, or wildfire hazards. A score of 1 means the proposed development complies with the county's adopted mitigation standards for development in floodplain, steep slopes, wildfire hazards, and the proposed development includes development activities on slopes in excess of 30%. And then what's deleted is, or an area is subject to severe wildfire hazards, since the hazards are essentially unavoidable with the new map. And
Say that one more time.
the wildfire hazards are unavoidable with the new mapping. And so it's all about mitigating for the hazard. It's impossible to avoid it, if that makes sense. So
It sort of does.
so in order to score 1, we wouldn't say, we just want them to comply with the wildfire hazards. And it just doesn't mean anything if the proposed development includes development activities in what I deleted, in areas subject to severe wildfire hazards. Because all the development in the county is going to be in that area. And then 2, also what's deleted is, or an area subject to severe wildfire hazards. It says 2 means the proposed development complies with adopted mitigation standards for development in wildfire hazard areas. The proposed development avoids development activities on slopes, but we can't say proposed development avoids activity in areas of severe wildfire hazards. There's just too much of the county that is covered by that area.
Isn't that strange that we're in this spot now, where you can run and you can hit, but you can't tackle? You know, I mean,
It's up to you if, there is a distinction in the model code that has the low wildfire hazard, the medium, and the high intensity. And, there's just a lot of area that's covered with that high intensity. So, if we put that back in, it's maybe worth discussion, but, the other thing to note, and I wasn't gonna go into too much detail on this, but in the model code, the regulations are the same, whether you're in moderate or high, and they're just categorized differently. But you have the same window requirements, the same roof, structure hardening, defensible space, it's same. So if we distinguished that hazard rating here, that would be like the only place that, we would be sort of teasing out that medium versus severe.
I understand it, it's just a sad state.
I know.
Ourselves into.
I know. But we do catch these every time permits come through. Earlier in the work session, there were, if we do 100 permits a year, that's 100 properties that are coming into compliance.
I do understand it.
Yeah.
It's neat.
Okay, so this one's a big one. This one is, this is the repeal and replace the wildfire hazards, section 72060. So I'm not redlining this since it's pretty much all new. So the structure of it, I'll just go over the headings, is to start with the intent.
Do you have a PDF packet page number? The whole thing, but it's hard for me to.
Do you have
This one I might have highlighted, is 125?
the attachment B, I think?
Yeah, 72060 is page 124.
50? Oh,
This is page 124, I found it, 'cause I had this one. for you.
okay,
Thank you.
so you're there.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just go over the
Apologies.
Page 124, chapter 7, or?
No, page 124 of the packet.
Oh,
Overall.
wait.
Yeah.
So we're starting with intent, the map, the activity envelope, then structure hardening and site and area requirements, water supply for fire safety, fuel storage and gas meters, and then requirements for properties meeting criteria in section 72060, which we'll go through why that's there. And then the last section in 72060 is ongoing maintenance requirements, that's H. So we'll just go back to the beginning. So that's sort of the framework of what's happening in 72060. So most of you were here when we adopted the lighting code last year, and we added an intent section to start off that section, and that seems like a good practice when we're touching these codes to add that in. And this language is taken directly from the CWRC. So the map, like I said, the text under this section B for the map is really reduced. It's just acknowledging that there's a map, who maintains it, and indicating that it can be amended from time to time. And then it's pointing to the building code so that a reader could get more information about the map, what the hazard levels are, what they mean, what's the criteria for each of them, et cetera. So the intent is to keep this very simple so that when inevitably there's building code amendments need to come through, this will be able to survive those, but we'll see. And the next one is wildfire hazard area and activity envelope. This section is indicating that the activity envelope shall be located to reduce the site-specific wildfire hazard to the maximum extent practicable by locating development back from the top of slopes. The fire code official may provide specific requirements. This is helpful because we don't have like a one-size-fits-all regulation about how buildings and structures should be in relationship to the top of a slope. But this allows the fire code official, our fire district partners, to indicate if that structure should be set back from the slope or not. And then this is something that's been a practice for a long time, but just indicating that the defensible space mitigation would may occur outside the defined activity envelope. So that would be, they don't need to define like a defensible space envelope, for example. And then the third topic under here is in describing ground truthing. So for this, the process for ground truthing to determine a site-specific fire intensity shall be conducted in the activity envelope or site plan review process or another planning process as practicable. This is helpful, you know, when you're reviewing activity envelope and site plans, we would make a finding about what the hazard rating is, and then practically speaking, when that approval would go in for a building permit, it just streamlines the building permit review because they already know what standards that the applicant will be held to. Next, we're gonna go into structure hardening and site and area requirements. First is pointing the reader to look at the building code for structure hardening so that they can look at building spacing and structure hardening requirements. I think I'd like to change that language to say to review building spacing and structure hardening requirements instead of review spacing and structure hardening requirements, if that's okay. And I also have an amendment for D2 that's pointing the reader to go to the building code for chapter 5 for site and area requirements. This is essentially the defensible space requirements, and staff recommends adding a sentence after here that mirrors the sentence for ground truthing that clarifies that compliance for site and area requirements should be conducted within the context of a planning process. This wouldn't be something that we would pass off to building. We would do a compliance review during planning process, and then it's just making sure that when the building permit comes in, that what they said they were gonna do at planning matches in the permit.
Maybe you just covered this, but I've never heard the term ground truthing before.
I
That's
believe
not like
this.
you set a match and what happens.
No, I think that that is something the CWRC, I've never heard that language. I feel like maybe they invented it.
Okay.
But it's just an exercise of having a certified wildfire expert go on site, sort of review the sort of specific site conditions about what vegetation is there and the slope, and, you know, it's possible that their analysis could say, you know, the map is showing this is in a medium hazard area, fire intensity area, but actually it meets the criteria for low. So then they would have different regulations to comply with.
Suzanne has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Suzanne. Go ahead.
No,
didn't see your hand go.
I just popped it up. No, I was just gonna add, Suzanne, we do it now. It's basically, we call it a site-specific analysis. It's just that they've given it a new name.
So if you're okay with clarifying the planning process similar to ground truthing, I'll add that into D2 before going to the board. And then I want to go to oh, go ahead.
Are you taking comments as we go?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we can go back to C2, wildfire defensible space mitigation may occur outside the defined activity envelope.
Mm-hmm.
Is that to include within setbacks? And I'm trying to think how that could go wrong.
Oh, yeah.
For a property owner or adjoining property
It could happen in the yard setbacks as well. It would just, end at the property line.
That would be taking down trees, taking down vegetation. It could be hardening, which could be putting in concrete elements.
No, the defensible space is all, they call it fuel modification, which is essentially removing or pruning vegetation. I didn't see anything about like a structured
Okay.
wall.
So no concern
If
with
someone
like
wanted a-
building and
right.
outside the activity. Envelope.
Yes, if someone wanted a structured wall in their setback, we have a review through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you had proposed in D1, structure hardening to review building spacing,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have concerns with vegetation spacing from building, which might be building spacing. I'm just wondering if that interferes in some way with I don't know.
Yeah, I think the vegetation spacing would be covered in D2. So,
As long as
Yeah.
it's not.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. I have more in C, but we'll get there. Or, I'm sorry, E.
I have a quick question since we're taking comments now, following up on Joe's comment. So does that mean that, that people can cut down riparian vegetation?
That's a really good question.
All right, I'll just leave it at that. You
Yeah.
can ponder it. It sounds like, this is kind of where it's kind of like, this is what the state says we do, and so we're gonna do it. But in any event,
Mm-hmm.
When what I really want is to expand my view in the name of, well,
My view of the river, someone
I
that
don't want
Yeah, there's a
those
balance
wetlands
to these
out there.
stuff.
cutting down, riverside, riparian. Yeah.
That's a really good question. I wonder if there's a way to solve that with some language in here, or we could, might actually belong, well, I might need to think that through if it's in the building code.
Property owner who it may affect,
Say that one more time.
maybe with the agreement of the adjoining property owner who would vote that to whom's benefit and liability
Mm-hmm.
the activity would be shared with.
Yeah. Well, we have, public noticing right now. I don't know of any process where, easement agreements are common to have the neighbor sort of participate in the application in some way, but I don't know about vegetation
Thinking
removal.
of this even further, I don't know about Colorado, but in many places, it's within legal means to cut trees or portions of trees that are overhanging your property. And that could be done within the setback in the name of this particular provision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think for that particular question, we can analyze that for the building code, since the details for site and areas and there. The riparian vegetation brings up some
I think
questions
that's
for
really
me.
Interesting, riparian.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, Suzanne, I don't know if you have any thoughts on if there's a statement here versus the building code. This code shows, has the 100-foot setback requirements from the high water mark. It seems like maybe that would belong in here, but.
Yeah, I think we probably just need to think about it, because I think the intent is it wouldn't be any different than what we do today. We're not letting people clear cut in a riparian area under the guise of wildfire mitigation. We still have regulations that limit what you can do in a riparian area and, heavily restrict that. So, that's clearly the intent going forward. And right, the defense.
Uh-oh. You
Happened.
paused.
froze.
Yes.
I guess the other thing I would just comment, just throw out, I guess, is,
Add to that.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
You
go ahead,
cut
Joe.
out. Is, riparian vegetation is less likely to catch on fire, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So, in any event, I would, yeah, but I wouldn't want to see people like clear cutting the, whatever, the banks and things like that under the guise of, oh, I'm just, I'm doing what my wildfire mitigation.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, Suzanne, is if, what's in the land use code about the riparian vegetation would be in conflict with what's in the building code for the site and area requirements, or how we tease that out to make sure one trumps the other.
Well, maybe we could add, may occur outside the defined activity envelope as long as it's within the existing land use code requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
and
that
must
it
comply with
can't- it
720.
can't trump or override the existing land use.
Yeah, maybe there's something about if in compliance with other, constraint provisions or something. I mean, I think we can think that through. But right, we don't want this to be used as a, you told me I had to do my defensible space, so I get to ignore all these other parts of the code. But, and I would just say that language about outside of the envelope is consistent with how we've operated forever. I mean, I think, we've always said wildfire mitigation could occur outside, because a lot of times to meet those 100-foot set, area, the perimeter type things, you are thinning vegetation beyond your envelope. But I don't know that we've run into anybody showing up and saying, well, I did what you told me to do. And by the way, I have this really nice view now too. So maybe we have. But
No,
I remember
it hasn't gotten to you. Yeah.
let's go back to the riparian vegetation. I might pop open 72080 before we take a vote. Okay, so I'm gonna go to D3. So the CWRC exempts two situations. One is if it's a meets and bounds parcel, 35 acres or greater, with only one residential structure and does not share a property boundary with a residential or commercial property. We coordinated with the state about this. We currently, like I said, we currently regulate everything. And the state is very adamant that that doesn't end up in the building code, the regulation for that. We can't remove that exemption. So what you will see when we get to it is we have regulations for those properties in the land use code. And we'll get through, which is similar to what we're doing now. We regulate everything in the land use code, except in this case, we're just sort of regulating the structure hardening, the defensible space for those particular properties in the land use code. Also, we only have 25, 26 of these properties in the county. A lot of them are owned by Picken County, or are already developed or have severed their development right for a TDR. I'm not even sure how many of those properties would use that code section, but we'll look at that when we get to it. And then the other exemption is historic preservation assets, which is a current practice to exempt those for their historic integrity. Now we're on E for water supply and fire safety. This section is essentially the same that is in the current land use code. One is about allowing the fire district to access pools and private ponds that most of the time they don't accept that as a water suppression asset, but it's in there if they ever wanna use it. And then the second one is about the sort of dry hydrants. There's a lot of properties that are on well and don't have a municipal water system with a municipal fire hydrant. So this one is clarifying about the practice of using dry hydrants. Oh, thank you. And then the last one is just clarifying that about the fire sprinkler systems, that people just need to comply, the applicants would just need to comply with what the fire district's codes are for those. Which is all current practice. Go ahead, Joe.
On E2,
E2?
with the water storage and dry hydrants.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that has kind of bothered me when, when we're subdividing a parcel and we have a new parcel, it's going to have a new home built on it, then we require all of this. But it's not required for the home that remains on the existing parcel, which could be 25 or more years old,
Right.
and therefore not in compliance at all.
Mm-hmm.
But either that old lot is now a new lot and should probably be brought into some sort of compliance, at least requiring some on-site storage. Or they're benefiting from the new lot, like this is the economist in me, free riding from the new lots, tanks that are put over there.
Right.
That will now be, because the fire
Yeah.
department's gonna come in, they're gonna use what's there.
Right.
So it's just kind of, there's a value transfer there that's not being recognized, and costs of the old home gaining from the subdivision and selling the new lot, but in no way using any of those gains to take care of some of their own risks and bring their property into compliance in at least some fashion while they make that gain. Is there somewhere that this fits here? Because wildfire is really important and probably the main focus of this in my mind. Go ahead, have your 25-year-old home, but maybe put a little bit of that towards water and, some hardening would be kind of nice.
Yeah, we do. I was just thinking that unless it's a 35-acre exempt subdivision, the subdivision applications would come through you. And
Just
we
did
could,
one that didn't,
Yeah.
it was just as I described and I was
Yeah.
scratching my head.
right.
Um,
And I'm curious if, did you make that comment or recommendation that the board would then require that to happen when they do their review? Because I think that's a really good opportunity for you. I don't know how to capture it in the code.
Yeah,
But-
I observed it at the time, I'm not sure if I voiced it at the time, I knew I didn't wanna go too far outside. But I thought now might be an appropriate time to voice it.
Yeah, and a lot of times when the fire districts are referral on those, they'll make comments about, all the lots that are created.
But they wouldn't
Yeah.
come out on the old property, only the new one.
Depends,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
depends on what the situation is, I think.
And then if you're putting houses closer together in the process, you are, I think, in wildfire, you're creating more risk.
Yeah, for the building spacing, sure. Yeah, I don't know, how to crack that nut with this code amendment. And some of it is like the code can't solve everything. Is it a program, that gets funded or something like that? I don't know, so subdivision regs. How does subdivision regs fold into this? We can look at that. The criteria of approval.
Or even just if we're doing a subdivision, require more storage capacity for the new lot than would otherwise be the case,
Mm-hmm,
typically.
mm-hmm. More storage. Okay. We can pop open the subdivision regs after we go through this. should we go to fuel storage and gas meters? This, let's see, F1 is currently in the land use code. And then F2 and 3, that information was pulled out of the State Forest Service home ignition zone guide. So we're just talking about defensible space and flammable vegetation and a fence enclosure, having 2-hour fire restrictive construction, and then keeping the vegetation away from gas meters.
I promise I don't have any other comments, but this one did.
Oh, sure.
They're
strike
very
me.
interesting.
The underground, tanks. I was wondering if that was currently in our code. But do we want it there? In many jurisdictions, I understand underground tanks are like a thing of the past because there's very substantial leak of rips that goes undetected and then abandonment. A tank just sitting there with crud in it and more leakage risk, and then also just a physical hazard. Just a question.
Yeah, I think my approach was to bring through the current code, and the home ignition zone guide didn't offer a lot of guidance because it's like a
It's a
different
separate
issue.
issue,
Yeah, about the leaking and, the brownfield and that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a great question. I don't know if maybe one way to solve that is to indicate a preference for F2. Like to the maximum extent practicable, fuel tank shall be installed in an above ground tank, and then or as a alternative, the underground tank could be offered, or we take it out, or say the underground tanks aren't allowed. I don't know how to do that in the context of this code, though. Code amendment. But we could do
Yeah,
give them
I
both
know.
option, but
It's sort
push
of a
them toward the
separate
other.
issue, but I
Yeah.
just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a separate one from the wildfire. Should we go to the requirements for those in holdings? That's G. So essentially, if a property is at least 35 acres, is completely surrounded by federal land and wants to develop that property, they would go to this code section instead of the building code. So we're saying that the applicability is all development projects, and development projects with additional residential floor area of 500 square feet or less is exempt, and that the owner shall comply with additional site-specific and emergency response requirements from the fire code official. That last sentence is added pointing to the fire code official because what you're about to read is very limited regulations. So it is anticipated that a fire code official would ask for more than what is here. And so we're just giving them the option to provide that guidance. So the G2 is talking about the non-combustible building materials. G3 is the Class A roof that's currently regulated. G4 starts the site area requirements for 0 to 5 feet. G5, it talks about those retaining walls, essentially making sure that retaining walls are not non-combustible when they're connected to the house, when they're supporting the house, or when they're supporting access. And then the fencing requirement, making sure that combustible materials don't attach to buildings. And I can go back to go over the site and area requirements just for that 0 to 5 feet. That's making sure that that area is a hard surface such as rock, gravel, sand, etc. There's no plantings unless the planting meets the ignition resistant plantings from the guide from the Colorado State Forest Service. And allowing the maintaining a mature tree with a 10-inch diameter. And then making sure that the tree crowns are removed within 10 feet, and then also pruning tree branches so that they're not laying on the ground, such as like a blue spruce tree would typically have branches that touch the ground if they weren't pruned. So that is the extent of what we're regulating for those 26 properties, those in-holding properties, and it's very basic. And I fully anticipate that the fire district would add more requirements if these ever came in for development review. Then the last section is just the ongoing maintenance, which is currently a part of our existing regulation. However, this list, 1 through 9, H1 through 9, is updated to reflect what's in that home ignition zone guide, which is the current best practice. There's 2 other amendments that are happening in Chapter 7 that aren't repeal and replace, they're more specific red lines. That's in Section 71030. Currently, exempt development activities don't allow a property in severe wildfire hazard to have an exemption process. And so we just removed that requirement so that those properties can come through and they need to comply with the code. So we can still provide them an exemption pathway. And what is an exemption? Typically, it's like someone wants to build a hay storage building or an addition to their house, something that can be reviewed administratively. They want to put in a new deck. Those types of activities that are smaller scale, they don't warrant an activity envelope and site plan review. But the planners still take a look at those to ensure compliance with the code before they come in for building permit.
Even these places where I realized our backs were against the wall, the development even in a wildfire area of some intensity, we can't say no to, even though it endangers the rest of the community. For this, if you want to add a porch or an outbuilding, but it's dangerous in that area, we still can't say no because it's a health and life and health problem for the rest of the community.
We wouldn't typically deny those requests, but I think the peace of mind comes with that those developments are going to comply with this code and the building code. So their roof will be Class A roof. They have some options for their windows, and the exterior hardening and the non-combustible materials, making sure that the wooden fence doesn't connect to their house and the neighbor's house. And then all the vegetation modification that would happen when someone comes in to do that development or request that development. I think that's the peace of mind is, not to deny the development proposal, but make it so that we're mitigating the risk as much as possible.
So they might not comply until they decide to add their porch or whatever. And all of a sudden they realize, okay, now I have to comply with all these wildfire mitigation rules because I wanna put this porch on. I mean, in reality, it
Mhm.
seems to be a better situation at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of this is, absent of creating a program where every single property in the county comes into compliance, we're catching them in the building permit process. And, if someone's putting on a deck, the building code has clarifications about what the limit of coming into compliance. I mean, those folks aren't gonna like rebuild their roof and, replace all their windows because they're building a deck. It's that the deck itself complies with the code, and then the defensible space from that new structure would comply with the code. The hope is that while they're at it, they would just maybe do the defensible space for their whole building, because it does serve them and their neighbors to do that. The code, as it will be brought forth to the board, for a project like that, it would be limited to the new development activity, not the retroactively apply to the building,
Right.
which is better than nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll go to 7:30:10. You'll see red lines for that section. That really just moved content from 7:20:60 to 7:30:10. That content's all the same. I'm happy to go over it with you. I didn't copy it in because nothing's changing there. But we can go to chapter 9 now. Chapter 9 has a section for replacing legal non-conforming projects. And what is happening here? So then if someone wants to develop in the 100-foot setback of a river or stream, the riparian and wetland setback, they have to demonstrate that there's no other area on the property that could be used for that development that avoids slopes, floodplain, geologic hazards, wildfire, and wildlife. Again, we're just removing that since that hazard is essentially unavoidable for a lot of properties in Pickens County. So the option here would be to, comply with this code section absent the wildfire, and then they would need to demonstrate that they're complying with all those mitigation requirements for defensible space and structure hardening. Now, I think this is the last slide for code amendments. These are definitions that were added to chapter 11. Defensible space is new, that's taken from the CWRC fire code official. We reference fire code official in in that section 72060 now, so we're just clarifying that that's the fire district that has authority over that property. Fire intensity classification, taken from CWRC, same as flammable vegetation. Essentially, fuel break got replaced with fuel modification. That's also taken from CWRC. Ignition resistant vegetation. This definition is in part from CWRC, but we're clarifying what types of plants can be used from that Forest Service guide. Tree crown.
Do we want to hinge this definition on the single external source, or do we want to reserve the right on our own to designate certain material that may not be covered? In the world we live in, the source may go away.
Yeah.
And we'd be left with nothing, as a worst case there, but also we might have differing views.
Mm-hmm. yeah, I kind of anticipate that question next week when we have a webinar with some landscape architects. Um, I have, that thought has crossed my mind. Maybe the way to achieve that is to clarify or as we've done in other places, like or as approved by the fire code official or something like that. Because somehow, like, it needs to be like, we need the ability to regulate, and so like draw the line and then offer a pathway is maybe a good solution for that one.
I think it's good to reference Colorado State, fact sheet, that's a good start. Just want a little bit additional latitude perhaps.
Yeah, I think a lot of practitioners would be happy to hear you say that. Okay, we can add that by fire code official. The next definition is taken from CWRC, but then also clarifying that tree crowns should be measured or depicted as at the size of the mature plant, not the time of planting. And then wildland urban interface also from the model code. And then this working day one is a little random because it's not related to this project, but I just noticed that it says 8 to 5. Our office is open from 8:30 to 4:30, and so just clarifying that someone should go to the Pickens County website to see when our hours of operation are and when our holidays are.
I
So,
like the straight through legal holidays, because that would
Oh.
include, a big snow day.
right, or powder day. I love that. I would love to see that show up in code. It's nice to have a little levity, isn't it? Do you want to move on, or should we circle back to unpack some of the conversation that we've had? One was about that riparian vegetation. We talked about some amendments under D1 and 2, and then looking at the subdivision regs criteria of approval for requiring water storage. I don't know if that just needs to be a different code amendment project. Suzanne, I don't know where the scope of this, where you think that would end. And then also adding to the definition for ignition resistant planning or as approved by the fire code officials, and then also a question about the fuel tanks. Does that capture?
I had 2 to add to the kind of general list that
Okay.
wasn't really tied to any specific language. The first is whether there is sufficient additional burden on the fire department for inspections or enforcement, such that we may want to designate appropriate resources for them to undertake these activities. I just think
That
it's
is
important to fund things that we wanna do here and make sure we have staff.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and that did come up in the workshop we held with the fire districts. They are concerned about it. My take so far is that the process that we've outlined here shouldn't be more burdensome for them because they're already so involved in reviewing building permits and land use applications. So my approach, what I'd like to do is sort of test drive this for a little bit, and if it seems like, we need to have a fee ordinance associated with this to help support our staff and the fire districts. I just don't know if we have enough information at this point to say what the delta is in terms of capacity or staff resources on all sides. Does that make sense? Yeah,
Maybe that's something for the VOCC to consider in the passage, because it wouldn't really belong in the code, but it might belong in their, I don't know what you call it, the official
it's a, I think,
passage of it, to come back and look at the costs a
Yeah.
year from now or something, and
Yeah.
and talk about it.
I'll just add, I'm John Houghton, I'm in the building department here.
I do.
We do have IGAs with Carbondale Fire and Aspen Fire that give them portions of fees for building permits that they review, or compensate them for building permits that they review, and Roaring Fork Fire collects their own fees for building permits specifically.
So they're already visiting these sites,
mhm.
these construction sites at some point anyway. It seems like what we're doing here is a little bit of stuff that's really already happening, but we're just putting it in the code.
And honestly, it is already in the code. It's just all in the land use code, and we're just giving some of it to John. And we'll keep some for ourselves.
That sounds good.
I wonder about how large the burden has become on the fire departments when when homeowners come out and assess my property. It's already built out.
Mhm.
My husband and I have done that probably over the last 30 years, maybe once a year, to say, are we still there? And I question this, and, shouldn't we cut it back a little bit more? Are you aware of how much that advice seeking has, because it certainly takes time.
Yeah, I know Roaring Fork Fire has a pretty built out program for
Mhm.
audits, if you will, of your property, and they'll give you recommendations. And I believe that's something they funded either through grants or themselves. And they have staff positions basically that, that's what they do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Or it's at least a significant portion of their job description is those, audits of properties. But I think it's something they want to do, right? They want to make sure people are doing what's practical on their own properties ahead of time.
Pretty
So
sure that
call me
was-
now, call me later. It's on fire.
Some of that stuff was covered, in the last election when they asked for more money. I think
I thought I
that
was
some of
remembering
that
that.
was actually listed as the reason for, and the voters did approve
Yeah, I
that,
think
so.
it was probably the first thing on the ballot, and it was
I just remember
resoundingly approved.
seeing that, that this process that they're working on wildfire mitigation was definitely part of, the reason they needed more money.
But Joe, I'm so glad you brought it up, because it brings it down to the practicalities of, well, who's gonna do it and for how much.
Yeah, and personally, I've had, in my own building, had contacts with fire officials that don't need to be named, but who have sometimes made reference to, I don't know if I wanna call it increased burden, it could be increased exposure to process, it's not their core mission. It might not be something that they don't want to do, but maybe, I don't know how tied that in they are to the systems like you have that like outline all the, some of you have access to like all the permits and you tell me exactly where they're at. But even there, sometimes things fall through the cracks, so you know what I'm talking about, it's another, maybe it's a different type of job they're doing here, but I wanna be cognizant of what we need to provide the wildfire safety that we seek. Without, putting burden on the actual firefighters who need to be out there and do the job.
I think that's, I'm not sure if we should, add that to the reso as like part of your P and Z recommendation that the board review if a fee ordinance is required. But I don't know, it's probably already baked into the IGAs, I presume.
Yeah, I would have to review the actual language there.
Yeah, we would amend those as opposed to doing a fee ordinance. I imagine they will tell us if they need to redo their IGAs.
But would we make a recommendation that the VOCC take this under consideration, or this topic under consideration generally?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you wanted to?
Yes, I think so.
So, I'm the chair, so I don't think I can move for it.
I so moved.
I second.
All in favor?
I
I think I can vote. Thank you. The other item that I identified was just the role of concrete and concrete products in hardening and the balance. They're the worst contributors to CO2, and the county has a mission to decrease CO2 emissions.
Right.
Here's a quick shot at it. Do we have a CO2 budget for a building project where, okay, you can put in more foundation, more square footage,
Right.
or harden, which you have to do. So if you have to harden, you can't build bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would be a much more involved system than than we can put in place today or think through today.
Mm-hmm.
But is that something we wanna think of and again, perhaps recommend for future consideration?
I would say that some of that we're already doing in the context of the Vision 2050 project. For the embodied carbon research, we sort of did an analysis of what could possibly be regulated in a survey of peer communities. And concrete came up as a big opportunity to clearly have requirements for the mixture and you know, whatever the variables are, there's ways to get there. I don't know if some of the I think regulating house size, I mean, we did that in 2023 once, and so the CGAC requirements do recommend that the rural area have a max house size of 8750 instead of 9250, so that could potentially be another code amendment to get.
They also go on with other methods in the future, strongly suggesting other methods, the tiering system.
Right, exactly, to sort of reward the smaller, give a carrot to the smaller developments. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think we're, yeah.
Joe's is a great reminder of a point that was brought up often and was, maybe I shouldn't say bedrock, but it certainly was a very strong principle that there is such a thing as embodied energy, and we need to take it seriously.
Yeah, and I would say that those wheels are already in motion. You're gonna be looking at the comp plan in March. That will set the policy foundation for a program, whether it's a carbon budget, the tiering, the requirements for concrete mixture recipes, those types of things, those would come after that policy foundation is set. So I would say we already have a ball in the air about that. Yeah. Okay, those were your two, Joe, okay.
That's all I got.
Okay, and I pulled up the subdivision criteria for approval. Just to take a look at it. One is complying with code. And then the other one mentions utilities here, which I would consider a water suppression part of the utility.
Yeah, maybe that minimizes the amount of land disturbance, because putting in a double-sized cistern one time, you know, would minimize disturbance. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm curious if, when the subdivision applications come through again, if you use this code section to sort of lean on when you ask that question. And then I think you have a pathway in the code now with that concern.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other one I wanted to go to was, the riparian vegetation, if that's in
The riparian what?
the riparian vegetation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the Joe Kraybacher brought that up. Suzanne, do you know where that code would be?
I don't know that there's anything specific in the code today, other than, right, what it says about, you know. So I don't know that we have the perfect answer this minute to say what we would amend and exactly where. Maybe it's just a statement with that, again, back to that original language you showed about what could happen, that it could happen outside of the activity envelope, that we try and capture something else, but I don't have, unfortunately, just a brilliant statement to give you to drop into the code right now. But I guess what we would just say with the P and Z is, we would look to ensure that the language captures the concern about, these requirements being used to allow removal of vegetation in a riparian area where we wouldn't otherwise allow it, and or, clearing stuff. So again, I think it's something we just have to massage to get there.
Okay, and we can work on that, with the direction of this commission, prior to the BOCC hearing, if you feel comfortable with that. But I totally understand the intent, and I'm glad you brought it up. I love catching these things as much as we can in this step, as opposed to when someone's coming in and, I'm like, whoops. We don't want to have a whoops moment when we're doing code amendments, so it was really a good comment.
Yeah, 72080A2A does refer to anything in the setback that would result in water quality degradation, stream bank erosion, or reduction in the quality of riparian or wetland habitat. Maybe that's the exception we seek.
Yeah, 2A.
A minimum setback from a protected feature. So if you're thinking
I think we want some specific language. I'm just not sure exactly where. I mean, again, I think, right, the intent here. I think we understand your intent. I think it's just actually putting, whether it lives in chapter 7 or again, it's still in the wildfire provisions. I think it's just trying to tie the two together.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that we need to try and
Yeah,
fully solve it this minute.
yeah, okay. So then I don't know if you need to, move those other two, if we need to talk about D1 saying, structure hardening to review building spacing and structure hardening requirements, that's a change. And then, number D2, that would say, refer to county code for chapter 5 site and area requirements. Compliance with site and area requirements shall be completed during planning review for activity envelope, site plan, or other planning review process as applicable. So adding that sentence to that provision for D2. I think those would be the other two changes. And then we didn't talk about trees overhanging property boundaries. But I do think that that is something that would end up in the building code, because that would be site and area requirements, so we can look at that for site and area.
Do you need approval for those two amendments that you just made?
I mean, you did it for the other one, so
Okay.
maybe it makes sense.
Anyone would like to move to make those two amendments?
yeah. I move to act on those two amendments. Do we have to? I can't.
No, yeah, that's okay.
What she
And-
said. What she said, yeah.
Yes, and we're gonna do the ignition resistant plantings or as approved by the fire code official. And then the fuel tanks, I still have a question mark about. But we can always tackle that in the next one also, if you feel comfortable keeping it the same. Okay. Okay, so,
So do we need a motion for all of those in a second, or a motion for the two?
yeah, let's do the D, where am I?
D2 in addition to D2, right?
D2, D1,
Building
D2,
spacing
and then the-
additional language,
For the-
site and area requirements.
and,
So we have a motion for that, do we have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you. And I'm also gonna add that carve out for the fire code official to approve other plant material besides what's in the state forest service, that'll be in the definition before we go to the board. Okay,
I can see the plant material getting a little, you know,
Mhm.
between plants that require water, so in essence, they're not
yeah,
fuel as bad as plants that survive well in dry environments, but then they tend to be faster burning fuel. If they're being a little
Oh.
bit of trying to find the balance there.
that's a really good comment, and I would encourage you to look at this guide because this guide does organize the plant material by a few categories. One is native low water plants. There's native, that's continued. And then non-native low water plants. And then we get into turf grass. And then this is the list that has high water needs, which is a very short list compared to the low water needs. So I think this Forest Service is really guiding people toward those drought tolerant plants, which hits at what you're concerned about, I think.
My concern was a little bit different.
Okay.
And it harkens back to when I was a kid and moved to Phoenix in the 70s, and Phoenix used to be good for allergies until everybody brought their own plants from where they lived. And so my concern is there may be plants that are not listed in that guide that would fall outside, and then we'd have a gray area. And we would want some flexibility to deal with that.
Yeah.
But your point is valid as well, yeah, there are a lot of questions.
I mean, you
Or
know,
they just cease to update that, I don't know, for the next 40 years, or take it down altogether.
I mean, they develop new plants every year. I mean, there's always new landscape plants and, you know, everything from herbaceous stuff to turf grass and shrubs and trees, everything, you know, there's always new stuff.
And you still have dirty fingernails from the last season.
I love a gardener.
You're our expert.
And you did bring up the debates that could ensue with others, so maybe we list that as the primary starting resource in order to maybe cut off some of those debates around the edges. Keep it like relatively simple, which I think was the intent of that provision.
Okay,
What do
Yeah.
you all think?
how would you?
Yeah, I think it's a good starting point, but you know, just looking at how long the list is, in my mind, it's not a very long list.
That's true.
And compared to like a catalog that I might look at to figure out what I wanted to plant somewhere, you know.
So, how would you amend the definition to
Including but not limited to.
There you go.
There you go,
Does that feel okay?
Yeah, it says we're starting here.
Yeah.
If it's not here, we'll have a debate, but if it's here, we're not gonna have a debate.
And the fire official's phone number is listed in that.
They'll love that.
Well, you know, I mean, I kind of had this envision of, like, gardens around, close around the house are gonna be water loving gardens, but it doesn't last too long, and then you kind of segue into more native vegetation that doesn't need a lot of water fairly quickly. And I was just thinking about that last house on West Buttermilk that we approved. It was designed that way. They had, you know, non-native plants and stuff in gardens that were close to the house, and then as it got further away, it was less native or more native and more low water plants. That's the way it goes. But it's safe and you don't use too much water.
Right. Let's move on from the specific code.
I was gonna say, drag us on.
We have only a handful of slides. We're at the finish line. This is just to show you where we've been since this has come about in July.
I'd
John
love to see this one.
John here and our CBO, Jeff Erickson, attended the Mountain Code Officials CWRC meeting with some state representatives in August. And then in October, we hosted our own version of that. That was only the Roaring Fork Valley counties, municipalities, and fire districts. In December, we hosted a few one-on-one fire district coordination meetings to go over some specific questions we had and to run some ideas by them to get their support. Then looking forward, next Tuesday, we're hosting a community webinar about this, about these code amendments, to go over what's in the code with community members and practitioners. And then also that day and the following Tuesday, we have office hours available for one-on-one questions and comments. We've publicized this on the website with the Vision 2050 newsletter email list, with the email list I have from SAGES, with the caucuses. And then we're doing a social media campaign and a press release tomorrow to get more. We already have 30 people signed up for the webinar, which is a really good number.
We're gonna have outreach to building contractors.
That was meant to be captured with that list I sent to like when I say SAGES, that's our applications and permits portal. We have email addresses from that program that we sent out to. And we also on that portal, we have a link to our active projects page, which takes you to this project so people can sign up for the webinar. Yeah, and we've been talking sort of informally with folks who are coming in for pre-app meetings, or people who we're not sure are gonna get in for building permit before this code is in effect in general. We've sort of been giving them a heads up. We've been talking about it in our pre-submittal meetings. So we're hoping it's not a surprise for anyone.
Well, I'll just say it, I had a contractor rip up a tremendous amount of material of cement fiberboard because they didn't know how to cut it.
Ouch.
And not only did it waste money, but I paid X% of that wasted money to the contractor for ripping up the material. And it went to the landfill.
Sorry.
So I really feel very strongly in stronger accreditation for contractors as we get more technical requirements for building.
Mhm.
It's felt not only by me, but, this contractor has affected a lot of people in this valley.
Yeah.
I'm not the first one to hit. But I'm an economist and the economics of that are just plain wrong. So,
Well, I feel like we're trying to shout it from the rooftops, so hopefully everyone will have their ears open. And this is just two slides that go over our criteria of approval for code amendments. One is three topics here that the code amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan. Amazingly, fire and wildfire are not mentioned specifically in our current comprehensive plan. That will change with the new one, but it's aligned with county values in general about avoiding hazards and mitigating for hazards. So I found my statement. Then the next one is just making sure that the text amendments are drafted in a form consistent with the format of the existing land use code. I think it looks the same. And then the next is when possible, we should repeal and reenact entire code sections rather than sort of a redlining exercise. You'll notice I did that with 72060. That was a delete and replace, but those other moments of just isolated changes showed up as red lines for you. And then the other criteria of approval is to make sure that the two-step review shall recommend approval and be approved if it complies with provisions of the code and the policies in section 160. So I looked at and then it also says all prior development approvals, but that one's for a property-specific project. This is a text amendment. So I did look at the land use policies in section 160. Again, those won't be there once we have the new comprehensive plan adopted, but I'm using the policies we have in place right now. I noticed that 160, 190 address natural and man-made hazard and resource areas to make sure development is sited in locations that avoid natural hazard areas, and where it's not possible, mitigation is designed to minimize potential harm. So that's the basis of almost the entire chapter 7. So we're aligned with that. And then adequate provision for water needs. Joe, I heard this was important to you. And so essentially we're bringing forth the same water supply standards in the current land use code that's reflected in the text amendments today. So that won't go away. So we'll be compliant with that policy as well. So staff recommends that this commission adopt a resolution recommending the BOCC adopt an ordinance amending the 2006 Pickens County Land Use Code, Title 8 of the County Code, specifically to Chapter 6, 7, 9, and 11 of the Land Use Code to comply with the State of Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Board 2025 Wildfire Resiliency Model Code with that will reflect the amendments that we talked about in this meeting.
And did we memorialize all the amendments that you indicated properly? I didn't keep my own inventory.
Yes, I made a list, and I typically also listen to the meeting again, just to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Yeah, no, it's okay. And the other one was talking about the fees.
I hope you speed it up.
That would be that wouldn't end up in the code, that would end up in the PNC resolution recommending approval to the board.
Thank you.
Your comment about the fees.
So.
So do we move to
that's
accept
what I'm
the
just-
recommendation as stated?
I move that be recommended as stated in this slide.
That's right.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Joe?
Joe Kraybacher, yes. I had a question though, but let's pass on this, and then I just had a couple quick, kind of somewhat same topic, but slightly, unrelated to the code here. So yes, I'm in favor.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, you go.
So I assume the building code regulates fireplaces, wood burning fireplaces, right? So I'm just curious about that, and how that I gotta believe it does, right? But you do get embers that come out of people's wood fireplaces sometimes. And there were a couple structure fires over the last maybe 5 or 6 years that I think started in chimneys that were not cleaned out, and were like older chimneys, right? That don't have a screen or a cap on top of the whatever on top of the fireplace flue, for lack of a chimney or whatever, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
description. So,
We can let John answer that if you want.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the building code does regulate, and actually the environmental health code as well regulates fireplaces, so, in most of the county, you're allowed two wood burning fireplaces, up to two wood burning fireplaces, and in the more urban parts, you're grandfathered in, or you get an EPA wood stove or gas log fireplace. But the building code regulates the construction of masonry fireplaces and, the testing that has to be done on factory built fireplaces. So that'd be, or wood stoves for that matter, that's also regulated, as a factory built appliance. But yeah, and the flues and chimneys are also regulated in the building code.
And are there annual maintenance requirements, and how does it impact? I don't think there's a lot of old, whatever, older buildings around. But I remember I think the husband and wife that got killed up in Old Snowmass. I think that started in their fire, in their fireplace, or in the chimney or something. I'm just curious. So if I've got a non-compliant fireplace or chimney, when am I required to bring that into compliance, if at all?
When you come in to modify it, frankly, is the only
Uh-huh.
opportunity we have to force compliance.
Okay. All right.
I thought that you just said that, did you just say that new wood burning fireplaces are allowed?
In certain parts of the county, there's the attainment and non-attainment zones of the county, and that's based on, basically the UGB is the non-attainment is what it's called, and that's where you're, I'd have to double check, I don't wanna put my.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's the PM10, or maybe it's smaller particles. I mean, years ago, we used to have the blue cloud that hung over the city, and then we've kind of gotten rid of that. The next comment I guess I'd make is, I don't think fire extinguishers are required for residential properties. Is that, John, correct?
That would be correct, yeah, fire extinguishers are not required
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for residential property, as you said.
But our
For residential, right? I don't know, those are things that we may want to look at some point. I think it's probably a low probability that, whatever, somebody's fire extinguisher in their residential house is gonna help, stop a fire, but it's probably prudent to have them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What about the EV chargers and batteries?
Uh-huh.
Those,
Is there a fire extinguisher that deals with those?
yeah,
It depends on your battery, but a lithium ion battery, I think the fire departments typically let burn out. They don't, have agents, I think, generally to extinguish those fires. They, manage it rather than extinguish it. And to the sprinkler question, in Aspen Fire jurisdiction, it's 3,000 square feet or more, requires a sprinkler. And the other two fire districts are 5,000 square feet or more, fire sprinkler, or as required by the fire code official. So if it's difficult to access, they may require it on a smaller structure.
But what I heard Joe K say was no requirement for like a dry chemical fire extinguisher and a kitchen for a grease fire
That'd be in a residential kitchen.
in a residential.
Yeah.
Is that something that we should provide for in this? I mean, it just seems like a sensible thing. Something I do, but I didn't know it wasn't required.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly could.
The existing land use code requires fire extinguishers, and I'm not confident that that particular provision is verified at time of building permit to make sure that the extinguisher is in the structure. However, if we do want that to happen, I think the best place for that provision would be the building code.
Right.
Possibly in this new section we're adding, the CWRC. That way, when they're doing final inspection, they'll make sure they look for all the required fire extinguishers in the house, and that could be a way to capture that requirement, probably better than what we're currently doing when it's in the land use code.
Would that be a recommendation that we make, and would that help you at all for us to make that?
I don't know, what would you say, Nicole?
Well, I don't know, because this group doesn't regulate the building code, but I do think it's common sense, and we can certainly just add a sentence to the building code when we go to the board in February. I don't know if it necessarily has to be a recommendation from P and Z, just to keep your duties contained. Yeah, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'll make this quick. I'm not sure I understood your answer. It's my impression that in about 1980 or 81, all new wood-burning fireplaces were outlawed. You could not get a permit for it, unless you, well, if you tore down a house that had a pre-existing wood-burning fireplace in it, but you didn't tear down the chimney, you could use that chimney. But I don't think that I know that law was passed then.
So currently it's all in the environmental health code
Yeah.
because it relates to air quality. That's the driver. New residential buildings may have, this is in the attainment area, which is the more rural parts of our county. New residential buildings may have one fireplace or wood stove and one gas log fireplace or certified wood stove. So a certified wood stove typically has like a catalytic converter on it that reduces its emissions, but a new residential building in the attainment area, again, the more rural parts, may have one wood-burning fireplace.
And Suzanne, that's definitely the way, it always differentiated between the non-attainment area for PM10 versus the attainment area. And so it was more restrictive, like you said, you couldn't get it back in the non-attainment area.
It shouldn't have been that when the city and the county both, like lodges, couldn't add new wood-burning fireplaces. It didn't matter where they were, and I thought it didn't matter. And the reason I'm so concerned about this is that I put a bunch of time in it, and I still have scars on my back from the people who wanted wood-burning fireplaces, new ones. And I was chairing that commission at the time, and I believe that we completely did away with the allowance of any new wood-burning fireplaces. Did we let that slip through? I think that's what you're telling me.
I guess all I can say, I mean, I obviously wasn't there for that. But as I've known it, as long as I've been with the county, there was always the differentiation between the regulations for the non-attainment area and the regulations for the attainment area. And that it was not a countywide prohibition on wood burning. But it
Yeah,
was
that's
in
my
the
understanding as
non-attainment
well.
area.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, that you can have one if you're basically in the rural part of the county, outside of the PM10 non-attainment zone.
So that we can rough that up. I'm sorry, that wasn't your, you didn't cause that to happen. I hope you didn't cause it to happen, Joe. Okay, I'm kind of amazed at that.
We can put you in touch with environmental health if you'd like.
I would like that, yes.
Should we go to the next agenda item? Is it just future meetings?
Yep, just future meetings, nothing on February 3rd. February 17th, we have a William Dolan Revocable Trust Activity Envelope GMQS allotment for additional residential, so we'll be doing some storing. And then the Solid Waste Center for location and extent, so pretty big meeting on the 17th.
And we'll confirm if that one starts at 4:30, right?
We will.
Yeah, because I think what the conversation, if everybody's agreeable to 4:30, we were thinking we go 4:30 to 7:30 for, evenings when we have a couple of items to try and get through, that having 3 hours will give us a better opportunity to do that and not keep you all too late into the evening. So,
Weren't we meeting before from 5 to 7? Wasn't that our aim?
That is our typical time,
5
Yeah.
to 7. So we're talking about adding an hour.
yes.
I think we've always sort of asked for the flexibility to know that sometimes we need more than 2 hours of your time.
Okay.
And we try to keep it to just the 2, but sometimes, like that meeting, chances are we probably would need more time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do we have any other items or a motion to adjourn?
No other items?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Have a good day.
All in favor? Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Joe.
Hard work.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there, Joe.
You bet.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Joe.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks.
Joe,
Oh, I think he left.
you're right.
Or
I'll say get
Or
well
do you
soon.